few Omanis whom we would, in our terms, regard as educated, having gone through school and done O-levels and A-levels, and the university had been built and had started work the year before or 2 years before. But the staff was full of people who had been recruited largely when it was being formed by the sheikhs of various tribes, scribbling on a piece of paper the name of so-and-so and a request to give him a job, which was then passed to the recruiting, or to the senior officers who have been appointed to recruit. And of course a lot of these people were taken on in various capacities, from drivers upwards, and to staff the organisation. And the effect was that something like about half the entire service of the Omanis were all the same age, and the structural pattern of succeeding generations of staff moving steadily up the scale in seniority or long service was lacking. So that was one factor. And the other was training. My predecessor, in what I to this day failed to understand why, had been advised by the officer in charge of training that the task of training the service had been completed, and as a result of which the training department, which up to that point was quite a large organisation, was shut down, and the only training officer left was a former intelligence corps sergeant. Our training department had again been modelled on MI6 in that we had an equivalent of the fort, which was 100 miles or so up the coast in a place called Sohar, and it had the whole sort of fort set up with staff and trainers and all that sort of stuff. And all that had been dispensed with. So that was one and most glaring weakness. In reporting my findings to Ali Majid after... I'll just go back and talk about the operational work of the service. I found that there was very little operational work being done at all. And at least not operational casework with case officers and meeting agents and all that. There was very little of this at all. And again, possibly it was my failure to grasp or take on the nature of the task as seen by the Omanis, and possibly even by the government, in that we were an organ of state, and our various offices over the country like the various police stations over the country, or various army camps over the country, and our presence in these main centres of population was as evident of state presence, and thus our station commanders would appear on civic occasions, when there was some dancing perhaps or parade, and the wali would appear, and the chief of police and the local army commander and the ISD commander would sit in the front row watching the dancing. And the work of the stations was to liaise and get on with these other manifestations of state power, namely the police, etc., and in particular the wali, who was the governor of the various regions, where indeed some stations we had were not where the wali sat, but there were always the tribal chiefs, the sheikh, the shuyukh in the area, and it was really, I suppose, it was from their dealings with the sheikh and notables that they obtained knowledge about what was going on in their area, and since there was, in point of fact, no subversion to report, of course there were tribal disputes, or neighbours would fall out, and there were things of that nature, or some corrupt practices of some official or other, but there was no actual security threat, except in the south of Salalah, where they were still charged with dealing with the PFLO, as I mentioned earlier. Thus, they weren't producing anything, and indeed, throughout my time there, it so remained in regard to the general reporting of the stations. However, it was quite clear that an operational capability to investigate and develop agents, informants, and to run them safely, and to assess their product, and to trace subversive movements which were, one could say, bound to develop. There was the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, and indeed the threat of Iranian subversion with the Shia element in the community, which could not simply be dealt with by arresting evident conspirers and just dealing with them with the heavy hand of state. And we had effectively, I would say, not no, but negligible capability in that regard. And in presenting my initial findings to Ali Majid, I said that there were few rising, that in general I didn't feel that we could omanize appointments held by expatriate staff, because the